I've never told this story to anyone except the police, and even then, I left things out. Not because I was hiding something, I wasn't, but because some details sound insane when you say them out loud. But it's been 2 years now, and I still sleep with the lights on, so maybe writing it down will help. Or maybe it won't. This happened in late October, out in Tillamook State Forest. I'd driven out from Portland on a Wednesday because I needed to be alone. Bad breakup, the kind where you start questioning everything about yourself, like maybe you're the problem, maybe you're too much, maybe you're not enough. You know the spiral. So I did what I always do when my head gets loud. I packed my Osprey bag, threw it in the back of my gray Subaru Outback, and pointed the car west. The trailhead at University Falls was completely empty when I pulled in around 2:30 in the afternoon. Off-season, weekday, overcast as hell, the kind of Oregon sky that looks like wet concrete. Temperature was dropping fast, maybe mid-40s. I remember thinking, good, less people, more quiet. That thought hits different now. I parked the Outback in the gravel lot, killed the engine, and stepped out into that particular forest silence that only happens in late autumn. No birds, no wind, just wet leaves underfoot and the smell of damp earth and Douglas fir. I grabbed my pack from the back, locked the car with the fob, I heard the chirp-chirp confirmation, and did what I've done 100 times before. There's a big Douglas fir about 20 feet from the parking area, low branches, perfect for hanging a pack. I slung the bag up, made sure the straps caught the branch, and double-checked that the side pocket with my keys was zipped shut. I'm methodical about my keys. Always have been. My dad taught me that. Keep them in the same place every time or you'll lose them in the woods. They had a red paracord keychain I'd tied myself, easy to spot. I remember patting the pocket twice, keys inside, zipper closed, then I walked into the trees. The hike was exactly what I needed. About 2 miles out on the Wilson River Trail, nothing strenuous, just enough to feel my legs burn and my lungs work. I stopped at a creek crossing around the 40-minute mark, sat on a mossy log, and let myself cry for a minute. Not dramatic sobbing, just that quiet leaking that happens when you're too tired to hold it in anymore. I checked my phone out of habit. No service. The time read 3:47 p.m. I figured I had maybe an hour of decent light left before the early darkness settled in, so I turned around and headed back. The walk out felt different. I told myself it was just the light changing, the mist starting to roll in through the ferns, but something in my gut was off. You know that feeling when you're home alone and suddenly you're sure someone's in the house, even though nothing's moved? It was like that, but spread across the whole forest. I came out of the tree line at 4:27 p.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone again, hoping for a signal. Still nothing. And my pack was on the ground, just lying there in the wet leaves, about 6 feet from the tree where I'd hung it. Not like it had slid down the trunk, it was flat on its back, straps splayed out, like someone had lifted it off the branch and set it down carefully. I stood there for a good 10 seconds, just staring. My first thought was wind, but there hadn't been any wind all day. My second thought was an animal, maybe a bear or a raccoon messing with it, but the pack wasn't torn. Nothing was scattered. It was just on the ground. I walked over, heart starting to pick up a little, and crouched down. The side pocket was unzipped. My keys were gone. Shit, I said out loud. I say things out loud when I'm alone. It's a habit. Shit, shit, shit. I started patting down the other pockets, thinking maybe I'd moved them and forgotten. Denial, right? Your brain does this thing where it tries to rewrite reality to make it less scary. You must have left them in the car. You must have dropped them on the trail. Anything but the thing your gut is screaming. And then I looked up. My Subaru was still there, right where I'd left it. But the headlights were on, both of them, cutting 2 pale yellow cones through the gathering mist. My stomach dropped. Actually dropped. That physical lurch you feel on a roller coaster. I stood up slowly, the pack forgotten at my feet. The car was locked when I left. I heard it chirp. The lights were off. The lights were definitely off. I'd turned off the engine, pulled the key out, watched the dash go dark. I walked toward the car. My footsteps sounded too loud on the gravel. Each crunch made me wince. About 15 feet away, I could see through the windshield. The interior light was on too, that soft dome glow. And there, hanging from the ignition, was my red paracord keychain. The keys were in the ignition. My hand went to my mouth. I don't know why. Some instinct to keep quiet, even though I hadn't made a sound. I circled around to the driver's side, my eyes scanning the tree line, the parking lot, the empty road. Nothing moved. The mist was getting thicker, swallowing the tree trunks about 50 yards out. I reached for the door handle, unlocked. I pulled it open. The smell hit me first. Not bad, just wrong. Like someone else's laundry detergent mixed with damp wool. Someone had been sitting in my car. And then I saw the tires. All 4 of them, slashed at the sidewall. Methodical cuts like someone had taken a sharp knife and gone around the car in a circle, one tire after another. I just stood there, door open, staring at the flattened rubber sagging into the gravel. My brain was doing that thing again, trying to find an explanation. Maybe I drove over something, maybe it was vandals, maybe... There was a piece of paper on the driver's seat, yellow legal pad paper, folded once, sitting square in the center of the seat like someone had placed it there carefully. I picked it up with shaking hands. My fingers left damp marks on the edges. I unfolded it. Block letters, blue ballpoint pen, pressed so hard the paper was dented. You went too far. I waited 40 minutes. I dropped the note. It fluttered down onto the floor mat, and I stumbled backward out of the car, my breath coming in these short, sharp gasps that didn't feel like they were getting any air. 40 minutes. I'd been gone 40 minutes. He knew exactly how long. He'd been watching me leave, watching the trail, waiting long enough to be sure I wasn't coming right back, and then I spun around, scanning the tree line again. The mist, the silence, the wet leaves. There could be anyone standing 20 feet into the trees, and I wouldn't see them, wouldn't know until they moved. My phone. I fumbled it out of my jacket pocket. No service, no service, no goddamn service. The nearest highway was 8 miles down a winding forest road. The nearest town, another 10 beyond that. It was getting dark, that particular Pacific Northwest darkness that comes early and settles in like it plans to stay. I had no car, no keys that I could use. Even if I took them from the ignition, the tires were gone. And I had the sudden, bone-deep certainty that if I stayed at this trailhead one more minute, I was going to die here. I started walking, not hiking, walking fast, then jogging down the gravel road that led out of the forest. My pack was still lying back there on the ground. I didn't care. I had my phone, my jacket, and a headlamp in my pocket that I'd grabbed on instinct. Everything else could rot. About a quarter mile down the road, I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. Parallel to the road, maybe 20 feet into the trees on my right, crunching through the wet leaves at the same pace I was moving. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. I started walking again, faster. The footsteps started again. Keeping pace, I broke into a run. The footsteps ran too. And then, nothing. Silence. Just my own ragged breathing and the slap of my boots on gravel. I slowed down, gasping, looking over my shoulder into the trees, everywhere at once. The mist was thicker now, turning the road into a tunnel of white with dark tree shapes on either side. I couldn't see more than 30 feet ahead. Then a flashlight beam swept across the road in front of me. White, bright, moving slow, like someone searching. It came from the left side of the road, cut across the gravel, and disappeared into the trees on the right. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. My legs locked. I couldn't move. The light didn't come back, but a voice did. Nora. Whispered. Soft. Almost gentle. Coming from the same direction the light had come from, he knew my name. I didn't scream. I wanted to. I could feel it building in my chest, but some animal part of my brain clamped down and kept me silent. I turned, slowly, silently, and started moving the opposite direction, back toward the trailhead, my feet finding the edge of the gravel where the leaves would muffle my steps. I don't know how long I walked. Time went strange. I remember falling once, catching myself on my palms, feeling the gravel bite into my skin. I remember the headlamp dying, batteries low, of course, because I hadn't charged it before the trip like an idiot. I remember the darkness getting complete, the kind of dark where you can't see your own hand in front of your face, and I remember the ranger station. It appeared out of the mist like a ghost building. Dark windows, locked door, sign that said something about fire permits. I didn't think. I picked up a rock from the landscaping border and smashed the window next to the door. Glass shattered. I reached through, cut my palm open on a shard, I still have the scar, and unlocked the door from the inside. I locked myself in the office, crouched under the desk, wrapped my bleeding hand in my jacket sleeve, and waited. I didn't sleep. I don't think I even blinked for the first 2 hours. Every sound was him, every creak of the building settling, every rustle of wind outside. At one point, around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the wooden porch outside, slow, deliberate. They stopped at the broken window. I held my breath until my lungs burned. The footsteps walked away. At first light, that gray, miserable dawn that Oregon does so well, I left the ranger station and started walking toward the highway. A logging truck picked me up around 7:30. The driver took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions. He just handed me a thermos of coffee and drove. The police found the shelter 2 days later. It was camouflaged, branches and leaves woven into a lean-to, set back about 200 yards from the trailhead parking lot. Inside, they found a plastic storage bin, the kind you buy at Home Depot for Christmas decorations. Inside the bin were 47 car keys, each one in its own Ziploc bag with a date written on it in blue ballpoint pen. Mine was number 47. The date was that Wednesday. Some of the other keys matched missing persons cases, people who'd gone hiking and never come back, people whose cars were found in trailhead lots, keys missing, no sign of struggle, people who everyone assumed had just gotten lost in the woods. The man who collected those keys was never found. No fingerprints on the bin, no DNA on the note in my car. Just careful, patient, invisible. I sold the Subaru. I sold most of my hiking gear. I moved out of my quiet apartment in southeast Portland and into a high-rise downtown where I can hear traffic and sirens and other people living their lives. I sleep with the lights on. I check my back seat every single time I get in a car. I changed my name on social media. I carry pepper spray and a personal alarm, and last year I bought a gun and learned how to use it. I still don't know how he knew my name. I never said it out loud. The trailhead was empty. My car registration only has my initials. And I still don't know if he stopped collecting or if he just got better at hiding. I've never told anyone the full story, not even Ben, and we've been together for 2 years now. He knows parts of it. He was there after all. But we don't talk about it. We can't. Every time someone brings up camping, I feel my throat tighten and my hands go cold. This happened last October in the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, about 6 miles from the nearest road, and I still wake up at exactly 4:07 a.m. at least twice a week. It was supposed to be our annual trip, me, Ben, and Max. We'd been doing it since undergrad. 3 days in the backcountry, no cell service, no people, just the 3 of us and whatever freeze-dried crap we'd packed. I'm in grad school now, studying ecology, so the woods were supposed to be my thing, my comfort zone. Ben's an engineer, always needs a logical explanation for everything. Max works in IT, and he's the anxious one, always jumping at shadows. Between the 3 of us, I figured we had the whole spectrum of human response covered. I was wrong. We parked Ben's Subaru out back at the trailhead around 2 p.m. on a Thursday. The lot was empty. Not unusual for late October. Most people have packed away their tents by then. The air was crisp, maybe 45 degrees, and the sky was that pale gray that makes everything look like it's under a layer of dust. We hiked in about 6 miles, following an old Forest Service trail that hadn't been maintained in years. Ben carried the SHREI half-dome tent, Max had the food and his ridiculous camp stove that sounds like a jet engine, and I had my camera gear. I was planning to get some long exposure shots of the stars. That was the whole point, honestly. Document the trip, make memories. We found a good spot by 5 p.m., a flat clearing about 50 steps east of a small creek, surrounded by lodgepole pines. There was already a fire ring there, a circle of soot-blackened stones that someone had left behind. That should have been my first clue, but I didn't think anything of it. People leave fire rings all the time. It's bad leave-no-trace practice, but it happens. I remember the first night perfectly. We gathered deadfall for the fire, mostly pine branches and a few chunks of old manzanita that burned hot and clean. Ben got the fire going with his usual efficiency, and we sat around it until maybe 11 p.m., eating dehydrated chili and passing a flask of cheap whiskey. Max told some story about a server crash at work that almost deleted an entire client database. Ben laughed so hard he snorted. I took photos of the flames, the sparks rising into the black canopy, the way the light painted our faces orange. It was perfect, the kind of night you think you'll remember fondly for years. I remember thinking, this is why we do this exact moment. We let the fire die down around midnight. Ben kicked some dirt over the coals, and we crawled into the tent. The sleeping bags were warm. Ben's arm was heavy across my waist. I fell asleep listening to the silence of the forest, and that should have bothered me looking back. It was too quiet. No owls, no rustling in the underbrush, just nothing. Like the whole forest was holding its breath. The next morning, I was the first one up. I unzipped the tent around 7 a.m., stepped out into the cold morning air, and froze. The fire ring was perfect, not just someone stacked the rocks back up. Perfect. I'm talking obsessively perfect. Every stone was placed in an exact circle, all the blackened sides facing inward, all the clean sides facing out. And the half-burned branches we'd left scattered around the pit, they were arranged in a fan. A perfect radial fan, like spokes on a wheel, with the charred ends all pointing toward the center. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just staring. My brain couldn't make sense of it. I'd watched Ben kick dirt on the coals. I'd seen the rocks get knocked askew when he did it. There was no wind that night. I would have heard it. No animals that could do something like this. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "Guys, come look at this." Ben came out first, rubbing his eyes, then Max. They both stared at the fire ring. "What the hell?" Max said finally. "Did one of you—" "No," I said. "Did you?" "No." Ben crouched down, examining the stones. "Maybe one of us sleepwalked. It happens. People do weird stuff in the woods, especially at altitude." "I've never sleepwalked in my life," I said. "Me neither," Max added. Ben shrugged. "First time for everything?" We laughed it off eventually. What else could we do? Pack up and hike 6 miles back to the car because some rocks got rearranged? That would have been insane. So we made coffee, ate oatmeal, and tried to forget about it, but I kept glancing at that perfect circle all morning, the fan of branches, the way the blackened ends all pointed inward, like an offering. The second day was fine. We hiked up to a small ridge with a view of the valley, took some photos, filtered water from the creek, normal stuff. But when we got back to camp that evening, the fire ring was still there, still perfect, and something about it made my skin crawl. It was like it was waiting for us. That night, we made another fire, burned more wood, and this time, before we went to bed, Max had an idea. "Let's mess it up," he said. "Like, really mess it up. Scatter the rocks. Take a picture before and after. If it's one of us sleepwalking, we'll know." So we did. I took a photo with my phone at 11:47 p.m., Rocks kicked in every direction, branches scattered randomly, the fire pit looking like a normal, messy campsite. Then we went to sleep. The next morning, I was the first one up again. I unzipped the tent, and my stomach dropped so hard I almost doubled over. The circle was back. Perfect. Every stone in place, the branches in their fan. And this time, there was something new. A small pile of pine needles in the exact center of the ring, arranged in a tight spiral. "Guys," I whispered. "Guys. Now." They came out. Ben looked at the ring, then at me, then back at the ring. His face went pale in a way I'd never seen before. He's not the type to scare easily. He's the guy who laughs at horror movies and says that's not physically possible. But right then, he looked like a kid who'd just seen something under the bed. Max pulled out his phone and compared the photos. This is not us," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "Look, the rocks are in different positions than the first night. Someone is coming here and doing this. Someone who knows exactly how they want it." We spent the rest of the day in a fog of paranoia. Ben walked a perimeter around the camp looking for tracks. Nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign that anyone had been within 100 yards of us. I kept touching my camera like it was a talisman. Max sat on a log, staring at the fire ring, chewing his lip. That night, the third night, none of us could sleep. We sat in the tent with the fly off, watching the fire ring through the mesh. The silence was crushing. I checked my watch constantly. 1:12 a.m., 2:47 a.m., 3:33 a.m. Nothing moved. No sound. Just the cold and the dark and that perfect circle of stones glowing faintly in the starlight. Around 3:45, Max snapped. "I can't do this," he said, his voice tight. "I'm going to hide in the bushes. I need to know what's doing this." Ben tried to talk him out of it, but Max was already pulling on his boots. He grabbed his headlamp, red light mode only, and slipped out of the tent. I watched him disappear into the tree line, maybe 20 feet from the fire ring, crouching behind a thick stand of manzanita. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. Ben held my hand so tight my fingers went numb. I stared at my watch. 3:58, 4:01, 4:04, 4:06. At 4:07, I heard footsteps. Not Max's footsteps. These were slower, deliberate. And there was a soft rustling sound, like old fabric dragging over dirt. Then I heard Max coming back. He was moving fast, too fast, crashing through the underbrush like he didn't care who heard him. He practically fell into the tent, and when I turned on my headlamp, his face was the color of old milk. His eyes were huge, his hands were shaking. "I saw her," he gasped. "Oh God, I saw her." "Who?" Ben demanded. "A woman, in the clearing. She came out of the trees from the north. She was wearing, I don't know, rags, layers of dirty clothes. Her hair was all matted, and she walked up to the fire ring and squatted down and started moving the rocks, one by one. Really slow, really careful, like she was fixing something that was wrong. I felt every hair on my body stand up. "Did she see you?" I whispered. Max shook his head. "No, I don't think so. She was completely focused on the rocks. She moved every single one, even the ones that were already in the circle. Then she arranged the branches. And then she just stood up and walked back into the trees. North, same direction she came from." We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We sat in the tent with our headlamps on, talking in whispers, trying to make sense of it. Ben theorized it was a homeless woman who'd been living in the forest for years, maybe with some kind of mental illness, OCD or something. It made sense. It was rational. It was exactly the kind of explanation Ben would reach for. But I couldn't shake the image Max had painted. A woman in rags moving through the dark forest at 4 a.m., compelled to arrange campfire stones into perfect circles. How long had she been doing this? How many campsites had she fixed? And what would happen if we interrupted her? The fourth night, we made a decision that I still regret. "We need to see her together," Ben said. "All three of us, just to confirm what Max saw, then we leave at first light." I didn't want to. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to pack up and run, but I also needed to know. That's the thing about fear. It makes you do stupid things because you can't stand not knowing. We set up in the same spot Max had used, behind the manzanita, maybe 25 feet from the fire ring. Ben had his camping knife. Max had a small flashlight. I had my camera set to silent mode, lens pointed at the fire ring. We waited. The night was colder than the previous ones. I could see my breath fogging in the air. The forest was dead silent again. I checked my watch constantly, 2:15, 3 o'clock, 3:45. My legs cramped from crouching. My fingers went numb around the camera. At 4:03 a.m., the fog rolled in. It came fast, thick and white, pouring through the trees like something alive. Within minutes, visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. The fire ring was still visible, just barely, a dark smudge in the gray. At 4:07 a.m. she came. I heard her first, that soft rustle of fabric. Then I saw a shape in the fog, moving slowly, hunched slightly. She emerged from the trees exactly where Max had said. North side. She was smaller than I'd imagined. Thin. Her clothes were layers of torn flannel and what looked like old canvas, all stained and frayed. Her hair hung in dirty ropes around her face. She didn't look around. She didn't pause. She walked straight to the fire ring and lowered herself into a crouch. And then she started. Her movements were methodical, obsessive. She picked up each stone, examined it, rotated it in her hands, and placed it back in the circle with absolute precision. If a stone was even slightly out of alignment, she adjusted it. Her fingers moved with the kind of care you'd use to handle something fragile and precious. Click. I took a photo. The sound was silent, but I swear she paused. I held my breath. Ben's hand tightened on my arm. Max was frozen beside us. She resumed, stone after stone. Then the branches. She picked up each one, straightened it, and laid it in the fan pattern with the charred end pointing inward. When she was done, she sat back on her heels and stared at the ring. For a long moment, nothing happened. She just looked at it, like she was admiring her work. Then she turned her head, slowly, deliberately. Her face swung toward our hiding spot. The fog swirled around her, but I could see her eyes. They were pale, pale and fixed directly on us, on me. And she smiled. It wasn't a threatening smile. It wasn't a crazy smile. It was soft, almost sad, like she knew something we didn't, like she was welcoming us to her forest. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard, I thought it would crack them. The camera slipped from my fingers and hit the dirt. She stood up, turned away, and walked back into the fog, heading north, disappearing into the white like she'd never been there at all. "Go!" Ben hissed. "Go now!" We ran. We didn't pack the tent. We grabbed our sleeping bags, our packs, whatever we could carry, and we ran. 6 miles in the dark, through fog and cold and fear. I fell once, caught my knee on a rock, felt the skin tear. Ben pulled me up, and we kept running. The sun was just starting to gray the sky when we reached the trailhead. The Subaru was there, untouched. We threw our gear in the back and Ben drove. He didn't stop for coffee. He didn't stop for gas. He drove until we hit the interstate, and then he drove some more. None of us spoke for 3 hours. That was a year ago. I sold all my camping gear, the REI tent, my sleeping bag, my beloved Benchmade knife that I lost somewhere in that panicked run. I replaced none of it. Ben and I moved to a 4th-floor apartment in the city, where the only sounds at night are sirens and traffic. I sleep with a nightlight now. I haven't been in a forest since. Ben did some research a few months later. He found a local news article from 2018 about a homeless woman named Margaret who lived in the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. She had severe OCD, the article said, and was known to local rangers for tidying up abandoned campsites. They'd tried to relocate her to a shelter multiple times, but she always went back. The article called her harmless. Rational explanation. Logical. Ben was satisfied. But I remember the smile. I remember the way her pale eyes found mine through the fog, like she'd known we were there all along. I remember the soft, sad curve of her lips, and the feeling that she wasn't just arranging rocks. She was performing a ritual, waiting for something or someone. And I remember what I found 3 days after we got home, when I finally worked up the courage to clean out the Subaru. On the inside of the rear passenger door, the door I'd leaned against during that 6-hour drive home, there was a small, perfectly round stone. Gray, smooth, soot-blackened on one side. It was sitting on the seat like someone had placed it there carefully. I threw it out the window somewhere on I-90. I didn't tell Ben. I didn't tell anyone. But sometimes, at exactly 4:07 in the morning, I wake up, and I lie there in the dark, listening to the silence of the city, and I wonder if she's still out there, moving through the fog, arranging stones, smiling her sad smile at empty campsites, waiting for the next group of hikers who think the woods are safe. I still don't know what she wanted. I don't know why she smiled at me, and I don't know how that stone ended up in our car, 6 miles and 3 days away from that clearing. I don't think I want to know.